Hello and welcome to Think Like a Game Designer. I'm your host, Justin Gary. In this podcast, I'll be having conversations with brilliant game designers from across the industry with a goal of finding universal principles that anyone can apply in their creative life. You could find episodes and more at thinklikeagamedesigner.com. In today's episode, I speak with Dominic Crapuchettes. Dominic founded North Star Games in 2003, and they have sold over $60 million worth of games during their first 15 years. He grew the company to 30 employees with 6 SKUs at Target in 2018. And he also got a chance to watch that company sink over 5 years and go to bankruptcy, and then has since purchased the assets of that company and recovered, and now is launching a new game, Nature, this year at Gen Con. Dominic is a great game designer with games that have sold over 4.5 million copies, including Wits Wagers, Say Anything, and the Evolution series. And we get into a lot of the nitty-gritty details, not only of designing and how do you design for constraints and does game mechanics connect to brand and the overall success of a game. We talk about the rise and fall of his company and where those failures are. I parallel that with a lot of stories from my own background. So there's a ton of meat here for anyone, whether you are an entrepreneur, a founder, a designer. There's a great set of principles here. And so I know you're going to love my conversation with Dominic Crapuchettes. Hello and welcome. I am here with Dominic Crapuchettes. Dominic, good to be with you, man.
Yeah, nice to hear you, Justin.
Yeah, I was before we started recording. I kind of I shared this like bizarre deja vu I was having because I could have sworn that I had you on the podcast before, and I have a record of scheduling a podcast like 5 years ago, but apparently it never happened, and we just had the IRL conversation I loved. So I was so grateful you reached back out to me to be able to share your story and have a deep dive on game design, business life, and all the fun things we love to dive deep on.
I am looking forward to it. Your podcast is actually the only, I would say, non-mainstream one I listen to. I listen to like Ezra Klein's show and The Daily and maybe some NPR, and then yours, and that's it. That's as far as I go.
Well, I appreciate that. I've to be in such good company, and I've got a feeling that we're going to deliver for our audience here because I know you and I share a kind of partial parts of our origin story from the early Magic days, and that's kind of when we first interacted. But why don't we start with your origin story for our audience here? Kind of what got you into gaming, and you could talk a little bit about the studio you founded and kind of your non-gaming fascinating background that gets you here.
Yeah, so I knew this question obviously was going to come up because it always does. My origin story, I think, is tough. I think really the core is my family didn't watch television. We played board games. We played board games. We played games 3 times a week, and they were often board games. We played charades, hearts, spades, chess, Monopoly, Sorry, Risk when I could convince them to play. So just all sorts of games, including as when we got older, Acquire was a staple of ours. So I think the origin story really is my family that didn't watch much television and played a lot of board games. Then I have another origin story. So I've got several. So that's kind of the core. I've been designing games most of my life. In 8th grade, I designed a game which got banned from school. And so there was a little bit of a bug there. That was really fun. And I took pride in the fact that they banned it. And the reason they banned it is because so many classmates were starting to play. It kind of started off with my small circle of friends, and then it started growing. And you'd basically take a turn during class, and then you'd pass the sheet of paper over. It was like graph paper to whoever you're playing against, and then they'd take their turn. Anyways, about 30 people started playing pretty consistently, and it finally got banned. A friend of mine took out a copyright. I still have it in a file somewhere. And I remember being like, the bug didn't catch me there in terms of starting a company. I just thought, that's really weird. I'm like, I'm just having fun. And I was kind of confused by what they thought. They're like, well, we could maybe make money. And I was like, maybe, I don't know. So that was 8th grade. Another bug is buying the Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual and the books and reading them thoroughly, cover to front to back, and not having anyone to play with. And finally, then going up to boarding school and high school, Couldn't convince any of my friends to play, but I could play with kind of some of the awkward people. And I think I got another bug there because the campaigns weren't what I was looking for. They were go into a room, fight a monster, get treasure. Go into a room, fight a monster, and sometimes go to a bar and pick up on women, which I always thought was weird. I'm like, okay, so you've got a high charisma because you rolled die, and so you're getting women. And I'm like, I just didn't understand the fun. And so for me, I was always going, why is there a monster in a room? Why is this room here? Who built this dungeon? And why do they have treasure? And so for me, I always wanted, so I really got the bug of world building. And another thing I really disliked was, let me go to the book and see what happens. Read through. Oh, I think in Dragon episode, 123, there's an article which says this is how you do fall damage, and just all these things which took away from the story. And so I created in high school my own game system, and then world builded instead of homework, and then played just some crazy intense Dungeons and Dragons. So I'd say those two things. And then wait, last one, magic. Those three things are probably the most formative three experiences.
Yeah. Well, the magic and Dungeons and Dragons are, listeners of the podcast will be or know the kind of cliched, most common to turn you into a game designer games. But I'm going to dig into this other piece because I find it interesting. So in 8th grade, you make this game, and whether or not remember more of the details of the games, we can choose to dive into it or not. But what I'm interested in is this bit that you did where it's, hey, I take a turn, I write it on a little piece of paper, then I hand it to somebody else, and then they can play it in class, right? Because I think this speaks to something that's an interesting principle of game design, which is kind of the form factor and the space that it fills for the audience, right? Yep. Like there's a genius there in this, like, okay, well, we're in school, so we're stuck in a world where we can't really communicate or play a live game or have a table in front of us, during this window. And so this like take a turn pass, I think is really interesting. And I'm curious how you think about this in terms of some of your modern designs, or if there is more space there, and the kinds of things that prompted my mind, right? When we did the Ascension app, it was actually one of the best decisions we made, was the like kind of take a turn it messages your opponent when it's your turn to play. So you could, there was enough meat on the bones for a single turn that you could then wait and then have a long-term game. Or things like Words with Friends or Wordle, where it intentionally restricts you to only being able to play it once per day. I feel like there's something there that maybe has been lost, and there's not a lot of modern games that are doing it that I can think of. What are your thoughts on sort of play constraints, and how do you build around that kind of thing? And you could take that anywhere you want, but I just found it an interesting topic.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic, and one that I think about more than most game designers. So I think about who's the audience and how does it fit into their lives, and what are the needs that we're meeting to those people. Games are an art form which can fit into so many different people's lives in so many different ways. So for instance, our company, when we got big, we were catering to what I used to call, so forgive me for being not politically correct, but I'm just who I am. We called them moms. And the reason we called them moms is because mostly the toy stores catered to 80% moms. Same with the Target aisle, 80% were moms. So we kind of knew the demographic. And the need that a mom has, which is also a dad, and I was a dad, so I understand this need deeply. You're putting diapers on a kid, someone's crying, you're getting a bottle together. You're managing very difficult, complicated relationships where everyone needs you. And what you want is a game that you can stick, I'm going to say, in your purse. But so like Happy Salmon came out of figuring out where this fits into someone's life. So you can't have a complicated game. You need to be able to teach the people, the kids, they need to be able to play while you go off and manage the baby and do what other things that you need to do. It needs to be portable, fits in your purse. So Happy Salmon, like when we first went into the toy market, I just thought, oh, we're doing games, and we did games in the mass market, and now we're going to do a family version. And the needs that were being met were not family game needs. People go to these toy stores to get expertise from the people that work there, to buy a gift for one of their kids who has, and I've been through this, I have 2 kids. You'll have 1 to 3 birthday parties every weekend. And you want to go and say, well, they're 6 years old and they like Star Wars, or they like drawing. And so you have to really understand, how is it fitting into someone's life? And that mom does not understand boys in a basement. And again, they can be girls, but I call them boys in a basement because that was me. We've got a lot of time. We want something super intricate, and we're gonna we could hang out in our basement for 6 hours and just have the time of our lives. And mom would look at that and go, "That's really dumb." And our boys in a basement would look at Happy Salmon and go, well, "That's so stupid. Who plays a game?" Like, they think each side thinks the other person is not very smart. And they're just completely different needs being met in different ways. Just like the need when we were in the party game market, it used to be mom would want to get everyone together, breaking away from the television, the sports games, and interacting. And so understanding like how are these games fitting into people's lives are really, really important.
Yeah, and I think that there's an important power that comes from understanding, both obviously understanding your audience and what their needs are. It's like absolutely critical to not just game design, but any kind of business or product or service you want to offer. But then embracing those constraints and understanding like that the medium and the constraints of the audience are actually an opportunity for creating new play experiences and new forms of fun. Whether that be designing a game for a mobile device where you've got somebody's attention for like a minute or two instead of maybe the hours you might have, designing for a platform like virtual reality where we've built games that have like the full spatial world around you, but after 20 or 30 minutes you kind of, in at least the VR we were designing for, was you were pretty much over it, and so you had to constrain within that space. Building a game for I've spent a lot of time. I don't think I've really cracked it the way I want to. Is like trying to design a game that you can play while you're like standing in line, like at a show or at a whatever, like something that allows you to kind of have that space. And I think that there's just like, it's a great exercise to be able to go through and can come up with a lot of really cool items. And in fact, this even like ties in well to kind of one of your most successful, or it might be your most successful game, the Wits and Wagers, right? You kind of took the traditional kind of trivia model and helped to adapt it for people who aren't necessarily that good at trivia. Maybe we can speak a little bit to that game's innovation.
Yeah, so that bug started in high school when we would play for class Trivial Pursuit. And I really, I didn't like it for a lot of reasons. One, I wasn't really into memorizing facts and regurgitating them back to the teachers. So I come from a family of kind of like philosophy academics kind of. And so for me, talking about interesting ideas was wonderful, and memorizing facts and telling them the facts that they asked us to memorize just was not a process that I enjoyed. And so Trivial Pursuit felt like a pop quiz. Lots of people would get mad. There's lots of complaining because it's like, oh, you got the easy one, and I felt the same way. Sometimes like, oh God, I had 3 questions that I knew and now I got one that I don't know. So one of the things I wanted to solve there was having everyone answer the same question. What the issue that I was trying to solve on the regurgitating memorized facts is, how do we design a game that sees how well you understand a concept instead of how well you've memorized a fact? And so that's what led to the numbers, is like, and all the questions did used to be more academic. So people who understood, the geography better would be able to give an estimate on the height of Mount Everest than someone who has no knowledge. And so they were all questions about making good estimates. And then the betting part came because trivia was just, not trivia, and Texas Hold'em is just starting to get hot. And so I was interested at the time of doing what people do in a lot of art forms, is take, a drum beat from Africa and a guitar riff from, some other place, and then fuse these two things together. And both of each individual elements have been refined for over generations into being something really compelling, but mixing them together feels really fresh.
Yeah. Okay. And I think this is great because we've already highlighted 2 really, really like fundamental and powerful principles, maybe even 3 fundamental and powerful principles of design. One is understanding your audience's needs and the constraints that come from that. 2 is sort of embracing those constraints and seeing how they create new design opportunities. And now this one that you just brought up, which is sort of, kind of combining different genres, ideas, this kind of creativity is really just sort of being able to take two things that already exist and mash them together in a way that is elegant and makes sense. And so your Wits and Wagers, where you can have a Trivial Pursuit like experience, but you're picking a number, number based answer, laying those out on a grid, and then having a poker like betting system where you can then bet on the answers. And it plays into what I view as the essential like party game like hook, which is the being able to understand and learn about the other people in the room, right? The sort of, oh, okay, I don't know the height of Mount Everest, but I bet that Jimmy does because he knows everything. So I'm going to bet on Jimmy's answer, right? Yep. And that lets me now play this game, which I think most of the most successful party games all have some aspect of that to it. And I think it was a very clever process.
Cool.
I would. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to bring out like several of the elements that are fun. So memorizing and answers and then stating them is something that's useful in real life. But as I'm in the marketplace, I kind of feel like a more useful skill is to know your team well. We're building a team, and I know who to go to for marketing, who to go to for each different aspect, because everyone has skills, and knowing the limits of what knowing when to defer to someone. Because sometimes, when you're in a soft science, you have no idea who knows better. And a lot of like team building early on is growing to understand your team and their strengths. And Wits and Wagers really plays off of that skill of like, there are certain people who always bet on themselves. And they say, well, that's the answer I thought it was. Why wouldn't I bet on it? And it's like, okay, you're missing a huge power of like learning about the people around you and leaning on their expertises. Another way that it gets played is just people playing the odds, and then another way is just people interested in the trivia.
Yeah, well, and that's it's a really nice thing to have these different aspects that different players can hook into in a game depending upon what they want, right? Like I think about this a lot in the context of trading card games, but it applies to a variety of different aspects where like what I am interested in maybe different what somebody else is interested in, and so you have this sort of psychographic profiles, right? So when I build games, I build some cards that have, again, I'll speak just TCGs and we'll broaden it, but I'll build some cards that appeal to the kind of the power gamer that wants to have the coolest, biggest things that they could do, the kind of Timmy in Mark Rosewater's terminologies, and then you have the ones that are sort of more for the competitive, and you can find the cool combos, and you have ones that are like really cool story, and this applies to the story side too, where we'll have like kind of the classic male power fantasy characters, and we'll have the more crazy monsters, and have the trickster characters, and like a lot of these like classic tropes that like I put a bunch of stuff out there, and different people are going to be excited about different aspects of that. But then we've created a big tent so that all these people can play the game together and enjoy the experience. And then I think with other games like things like Wits and Wagers, as you mentioned, there's this version where you can have the okay, I'm interested in, playing the odds and betting the thing. I'm interested in seeing what I actually know. I'm interested in just the socialization and understanding the people around me. And the more of those hooks that you can put in, the better people get. And they're the more likelihood that the game is going to succeed, right? It's very hard for games to succeed and reach critical mass. So you want to have a bunch of those hooks. I'll give one more example, then I'll put it back to you. It was my game, You Gotta Be Kidding Me, which also made it into Target, had a original version of that game was just like shapes and symbols, and it was the same gameplay, but it just didn't quite hook. And then when I added in adorable animals and everything, now all of a sudden you have people that can just enjoy the game for that part.
Yep.
And the people who enjoyed the game for the core of the game still enjoyed that. And now all of a sudden I had a bigger tent in a game that can succeed at a different scale.
Yep, exactly.
So let's, we've talked about a couple of things, and I think we'll bounce around a lot of game design principles, but you're kind of one of those rarities, like me, where you're both a game designer and a founder and a CEO. And there's a lot of interesting opportunities, challenges, and lessons that come from that. And so I want to make sure we devote a sufficient amount of time to that. So let's set the table. Let's talk about the founding of North Star Games and what that was like. And you've got a really impressive arc. I want to be able to touch on several parts of it that I think will be both instructive and interesting for our audience.
I am primarily a game designer. I came to business reluctantly. So that kind of religious background kind of had a vibe that money is bad. And I always looked at business people as bad and superficial. And so that wasn't what drew me to games. What drew me was wanting to design games and get them out to people. And so I reluctantly went to business school to find a business partner and to learn about what I would need to do to start this company. So when I think of myself as a game designer, but then I went to business school. I worked at an entrepreneurship for like the Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship. I was an intern there for a couple of years. I was a consultant to entrepreneurs. So I really went deep into the vibe so that I could try to build my company.
So let's linger on this for a moment, because I this is a part of your background I did not know, that the kind of sort of missionary, business and money is bad, sinful thing.
Oh God. Yeah,
What
for sure.
was, what, I mean, that must have been really hard to grow up with. I mean, that ability to, to make the, feel like you want to create things and to be pressured against it. Like what, and then to jump so deep in and go to business school and be, entrepreneurship internships and processes. Like, what was that like? How did you make that break? What was put me in that? Paint me a picture here.
Okay, so they're not discouraging me from creating. We're a mission driven family. So following your passion is what I was told to do from day one. So I was encouraged to follow my passion, and I was encouraged to like see my calling in life, even though my parents are not religious anymore. That vibe is still there. Like you seek out your calling and you figure out, what are you called to do? And so that framework is still influencing me. And
So this pursuit of passion, I similarly, strongly support and speak to, I think, but pursuit of passion in an intelligent way, I think, is really important, right? The just pursue your passion and, go become a football player or a movie star or a game designer, right? Like these are all like kind of dream careers, and most people who do it don't succeed. So while I do believe in following your passion and not being trapped, as I was in law school and on somebody else's path, right? I do think that there's an intelligent way to do it, and there's challenges that come with that. So you must have started as a game designer and then felt like there was no other choice but to create your own company. Or did you just hit a wall, or did you try to pitch your games to other companies? Did you try to were there other paths you tried before you're like, I have a game, I want to make it, I got to figure out, I got to go to business school and figure all that stuff out? Was there a path in between?
Well, I pitched a game that I was to two different companies. Actually, both companies wanted it, and then it ended up getting dropped because Alan Moon's Ticket to Ride exploded, and then they chose an Alan Moon game instead from Malaya. So I pitched twice, and it was successful. This is back in the late 90s, maybe no, I guess it would have been early 2000s. But no, I just always knew I was going to start up a company. At first, I thought I was going to compose classical music, and then I realized nobody cares about classical music. And so then I went to, I started, I was always designing games anyways, and people started asking to borrow my game for family, like New Year's Eve and stuff. And so that kind of planted the seed of, well, maybe I could turn this into a career and do something that I love and live off of it.
And then
I went, and I was never taught to be practical. So your parents were saying, hey, become a lawyer. That's the smart way. You've got a career. My parents never talk about career. I was completely lost. So I've got a bunch of years where I'm just kind of wandering around trying to figure out what my calling is, because that's more of how they speak. And they do a couple's relationship communication skills. They do workshops. And that's like their mission in life. And they feel like they're helping the world by doing this. So yeah, I think I struggled on the opposite end, is like you say, how do you do this practically? And even though I really disliked business, I kind of was introduced to business through the eyes of economics. So economics is not a selfish endeavor. It's really about how to help the most number of people in your country. And business is used, people selfishly pursuing their own interests is used to help meet the needs of people around them, with an economic viewpoint. So then I kind of started realizing, businesses are really meeting the needs of people, and they're actually providing a really good function. And so I kind of made peace with, I'm going to try to figure out how to do this craft in a way that people really like what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the essence of business, like in its purest form, right? Like, I'm going to add more value to you, then you will exchange to me, which is why you give me money in exchange for the thing that I'm doing that you consider to be more valuable than the money you've just handed me, right? Like that's the whole point is an asymmetric value exchange. And so, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. And so you made this jump, and then and when it came to starting a company, were there, this was back in 2003, I think you founded the company.
Yep.
And so what is there any kind of key insights from that process that you either did particularly well, or that you maybe did not so well, or advice you'd have for somebody else that's thinking about going down the same route?
So I was very good. I used to captain a fishing boat in Alaska in the summers, and I was very good at a small team of experts. So I dive into just entrepreneurial endeavors. Give me something that I know nothing about, and I feel comfortable. I'm on a boat and something breaks, and I go, "We got to fix it," and you figure it out. So entrepreneurship is something that was very made sense to me. Like I was very good at. What I did horribly was grow from, I would say, 5 people up to 25 plus another 5 that were contractors, full-time contractors. So that transition where there's a layer between you and employees, and I am especially bad working with people who aren't experts. I get frustrated. I can't communicate vision. Especially back then, I was like, I'm busy. I've got stuff to do. I'm working. I can't waste my time teaching you stuff. Figure it out. And then those people, most people are not entrepreneurs at heart. So they don't know how to just figure something out. They're like mad because you didn't tell them what they're supposed to do. So that's where I failed horribly. There was a lot of things that led to the failures of our company. Another one being we had 3 co-presidents, which works really well when you're growing. But what happened is we siloed, and then during a dramatic big shift in the market, we weren't able to pivot because we have 3 competing visions. So combination of a lot of those things.
Okay, well, so yeah, there's a lot to unpack in there, right? So, and look, no, I appreciate your honesty and transparency here. Like these are hard things, and I've shared this story also where I had exactly the same problem as you did, where running a team, when you're at that 1 to 10 people, maybe even up to 12 to 15, like what everybody's doing, you can manage everyone directly, you have like all the context and all the information, and also especially if you're in person, there's an absorption of knowledge from everybody that like makes things run very efficiently. Once you start crossing that 10 to 15 threshold, and especially and for me it was similarly, I was at about 25 employees and almost exactly the same 5 or 10 contractors, and at all of a sudden I lost thread of the organization, and I couldn't manage in the correct way. And I actually ended up taking, even when I had really smart people, I took a lot of smart people and put them in a room and made them dumber. I can admit that to myself now. And it's tough, right? You start to have siloing, you start to have factioning, you start to have different people with different interests, and you don't. And so I almost lost my whole company. I almost went, we literally that phase of talking to bankruptcy attorneys and it very, very painful. And it sounds so.
Same thing happened.
Yeah.
Same thing.
So you're not alone here, and I'm sure that there are people listening that are experiencing this, and so part of why I like to share these stories is so that people that are out there that maybe feel like they're alone or they're failing, that they know that they're not, and then hopefully there's some other people that are listening that haven't yet hit this barrier that maybe will learn from us about how to fix it or what to do about it. So, and I also want to, because we glossed over, you guys had massive success, right? I think it was $16 million worth of sales in the first 15 years. You had, just give people a sense of the scale before we tear it down.
Yeah. My games that I've designed, I've sold 4.5 million copies, and then we've sold another probably 1 million copies of other games.
Yeah. These are unbelievable levels of success. So again, another just important point to drive home is like, there's no level of success where you're immune to these kinds of problems and failures.
No, look at Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had amazing success and couldn't manage certain things and got booted out and then had to rethink through, how he's going to become better, and then came back and really was able to transform the company again.
Yeah. There are a few sort of definitions of success that I find amusing and repeat often, right? One is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And the other is that you're able to make more and more expensive mistakes. And that's what I sort of learned. I've been given the opportunity to make more expensive mistakes as I've gotten better at what I do, and and you keep stretching, right? That's what keeps things interesting. So okay, so well, let's speak to a little bit of the but we'll move forward into the kind of more of the challenges. But before we do, like, what is it that you would say now that you've learned about how to do this, either do this job better, if you feel like you've got solutions on how to do a job better as you kind of scale, or if you've decided, hey, listen, this isn't my wheelhouse, I would like to stay in a smaller, but like, how do you adapt?
So, I've come to terms with the fact that I have an entrepreneurial spirit that a lot of people don't have. And so my thinking way back when was, we'll hire a team of like go-getters and we'll figure it out. And now I think that was a poor methodology. Now my methodology is, what drives sales? And how do you find people that have expertise in those areas that are needed to drive sales? And get someone with that expertise. You'll never find someone who's perfect, but in our industry, we design games, we create brands that hopefully make people froth. Like, they're like, oh, I want that so badly, and then we have to let them know that, hey, we have this thing that you really, really want, and that's where we're experts at. And so I can't train someone to do the things that are that critical. I need to find someone who's really good, and then bring them on. And then my job as the leader is to have a vision that can navigate the risks in our industry and communicate it. And then we work together as a team, because as soon as let's pretend like we're crewing in a rowboat. As soon as one person's rowing a little bit to the left and you're rowing a little bit to the right, you're just going slower. No matter what, you're just going slower. You're moving a little bit this way, and a little bit this way, and a little bit this way. And the more you can get everyone aligned, even if you're not necessarily going in the right direction, moving as a unit quickly is just more powerful than being pulled in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, I think that the trick is really getting alignment to function, right? Like, that ability to keep people moving together is not easy, right? So to me, the answer there, a lot of that is culture. I've taken a lot more responsibility and put a lot more time and attention into company culture than I have before, which is both, how do you hire the right people and what's your filters for doing that? How do you onboard those people to make sure that they feel connected and they understand like how we do things here, right? And then how do you maintain that over time and make it so that your, the core team of, that 6 to 10, whatever, become the sort of evangelists, and then they spread it, so that it's not you that has to be the one that's the voice in the center of it. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about that sort of stuff and team effort and time to keep maintaining it, because otherwise, as you said, you start rowing in different directions, and it can lead to some real problems pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, and as soon as someone doesn't feel heard and holds resentment, that festers, and they're going to share that at some point with someone, and then you're kind of fracturing the community, and you're not all working hard with one common goal, moving in a direction.
Yeah, making sure people feel heard, making sure you create a space of psychological safety for people to be able to speak their mind, encouraging dissent. There's a lot of different...
And then encouraging dissent, but then making a decision and everyone getting on board and going with that decision.
Yes, I'm a big believer in. I think I first heard this expression from Jeff Bezos in one of his Amazon letters: is disagree and commit.
Yeah.
That we can all, I want everybody to disagree. I want everybody to have their voice heard, and then whoever it is that's going to make, that's the decision maker in that space, makes the decision, and everybody else tries to make that as successful as possible. Even though I didn't think it was the right choice, I'm going to go ahead and do my best to make it happen. And
Yep.
and another thing that's been very challenging for me, and also prompt you because I'm going to want you to dive in a little bit more into some of the specifics of the key features that you talked about in terms of like how do you create frothing brands and how do you create some.
Yeah.
So we're going to go back to that, but I think the other key as an executive and kind of CEO I found is like the default is people are looking to you for answers. The default is what's going on and you're the one that's going to give the answer. In my experience, people will actually warp themselves. Even smart, normally like argumentative people will warp their opinions around yours. And so what I have tried to also focus on is speaking last. I'm not going to say I'm very good at this, but I'm trying to. And whenever a decision is reversible, try to make somebody else make it, or at least force them to put an opinion out first. And when they raise a question, I try to have them say what they think the answer is, even if their confidence level is low, because most of the time they're right, and you're training them to come up with an answer instead of training them to wait for you. And because again, I know it's shocking to hear this, but I am wrong sometimes also. And better that I train other people to say to put forward answers than not. And so, again, these are just like, I think this is a really just interesting topic because I think a lot of people hit this barrier, and I'm glad that you kind of brought it up. But then, so if there's other things that you have found as practices on this side of things, where it's like other ways you're able to maintain alignment, culture, keep people rowing in the same direction as you put it, and or I want to make sure we transition back into this idea of like let's get specific into some of these skills that you need in a successful company.
Well, so specifically, they do these team trust building exercises, and the way I understand that now is I need to trust that Ross understands aspects of marketing that I don't. And I need to defer to him when we're in that realm. And I need to defer to Sam when it comes to supply chain. And Sam needs to defer to us when we say, no, the product has to come a month early because we have to get it to reviewers. And like, he has to trust us because he's looking at his job and he's saying, well, that looks badly on me because the product's going to be $10,000 more expensive. And he has to trust us when we say, no, that's worth $10,000. So as it turns out, the world is a very, very big place and you can't know everything. And that's why you get experts in their field and you need to trust that they understand their field better than you do. Does that mean that they're always right? No, there's going to be 20% of the time where you had an insight and they didn't, and so good communication skills are obviously really important and there's a give and take. But that's why I'm really big on, make sure you hire someone that has the actual skill you need. In fact, I just made a huge mistake here and we had to let someone go because of, the tariffs are obviously elephant in the room, causing a lot of issues. But I hired someone who had worked for 5 years at a retail game store, had great experience there, but I hired them to be a salesperson and they weren't. And I never was a salesperson in our company either, so I couldn't onboard him. And so it just created issues because, he thought he was doing what he needed to be doing. And really at one time he should have said, Dominic, this isn't working. This isn't working. This whole position isn't working. But he didn't have the experience to even know that. And I didn't have the experience to really know that. So that's why I'm really big on, another time we hired someone who's a really good, he runs events. He ran poker things. He ran he's like a comedian and he's really good in front of people at a big stage. And we hired him to do our social media. And he wasn't an expert at social media. And in fact, he's not data driven. He doesn't like data. He hates spreadsheets. And so there's a whole element of social media and advertising, online that really you need to be data driven to do this well. And what he cares about and what he's good at is being in front of a group of people and getting a crowd riled, and so you think that the skills are transferable, but really I've learned I want to if the skill is really important to the success of our company, I need someone who's done that exact thing for 3 to 5 years.
And so this role as kind of a core sales in particular, let's just like sort of dive into that, right? How do you find that right person? And this applies to a lot of different areas, right? Where it's like, I don't know how to do this thing. I've never done this thing. I need this thing. how do you find the right person? Is it just that, okay, well, they did this thing somewhere else, so I trust that they can? Is there like, how do you even vet their performance? I found this when I'm hiring, engineers has been my kind of challenge, right? Like I have to hire people to program, and we have a whole digital division of our company. I don't know how to program. I don't know if they're doing a good job or not. Like I've gathered some knowledge now after doing this for 15 years, but it's not like, I just have to kind of trust and hope for the best a lot of the times, which is rough, right? So how do you manage that when you're trying to hire a critical skill for your company, right? And we've talked about a few of them here, like sales and marketing and production, logistics, right? In addition to design, and how do you manage that and do that successfully?
That's a really good question. I can't say that I'm really good at it. What I'm increasingly doing is networking with people, and you quickly learn who's knowledgeable. Like I can tell you're knowledgeable. I mean, I've listened to your podcast, so I know that you think about the same sort of things that I think about, and you think about them deeply, and you're good at it. And so, as you network, people say, "Oh, have you spoken to so and so? He's good." And so, it turns into a little bit of that good old boy network, But there's a lot of valuable information from someone that's saying he's really good. You should look at when a person and trust deeply is saying that. You should look at that person,
dude. I think this is like, I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but I think it's a really important and profound insight. Like the friend referral, by far, I think literally every good hire that I have ever hired has been like a friend referral. Like that might be too extreme. Obviously there's versions where I just like had enough personal experience with them directly that I knew because I just did interact, right? So like if I'm hiring somebody cold, like, where it's just an interview and not like a fur thing, I always just do a 3-month trial. I'm like, you're hired for 3 months. There's no guarantee after that. We're going to see how it goes because I cannot know till I actually work with somebody. But I think that friend referral thing is like, it's really important, and it leads to like strategic next steps, right? So if you're a person hiring, one of the things that I have learned to do is like, I try to ask friends around more often, right? I talk about, I try to build a network of people that might be useful and might be valuable down the road. Even if I'm not hiring that right now, I kind of just try to keep those things going. And in fact, we just joked about this because we're actually hiring a role right now. And I just like, okay, I'll just put up the bat signal. And I like message like a group of trusted friends. And I always get a response of something, maybe it doesn't work, maybe it does, but that's like far better than like LinkedIn or any other freaking mechanism or headhunters. I've never had success with that. So I think it's like
they're looking at resumes and they want to sell people and it's not necessarily the right way.
And then on the flip side, for those of you listening that are not the employers, but the employees or potential employees, you want to be doing that same sort of networking too, right? And that means putting good work out there to connecting with people that are, that are professional and have a respected network of friends. And a lot of times that putting that good work out there means like doing work for free and posting things that people can discover and then starting to, connect and just add value to people in the industry in various different ways. And then that is the more likely way to sort of get quote unquote discovered or get those opportunities. So I think it really is, I have not found a better way. I keep looking for a better way. I keep looking
for instance, our nature playtest team, they're all volunteers. They're going to get their name in the credits and they're going to get a free game, but they're basically just donating time. It's fun. We have a great time. But that process allows me to work with people and see, like on the game design side, who's really good. And then if I were to want to pay for development because my bandwidth is too narrow, that's the first place I'm going to look is like, oh, what would be great is this person for this thing.
Yeah. No. And I had this was a totally unintentional thing, but I ended up creating the best like recruiting tool I've ever imagined with my Think Like a Game Designer masterclass. Because I literally do a 3-month intensive with people and I teach them how to make games and I watch them make a game. And by the end they have a game and they pitch it. And I like literally can just find the best of them and be like, yep, I'm going to hire you. I'm going to hire you.
That's great.
I did not intend it, but it is the best recruitment tool I've ever come up with.
And then here's another really interesting thing. Specialties are just so like people are really good at specific things. So for instance, Nick Bentley, he was internal with North Star for a while. He designs 2-player abstract games and they're fantastic. And I hired him to first work on Oceans, which is a Magic the Gathering card synergy type game. And his brain does not work that way. So in my mind, it's like, well, he's a phenomenal game designer, but he was the wrong person for the task of synergistic card games. So just like think of movies. There's some people that do comedies really well, or romantic comedies, but if you tried to take them to do a war movie or a zombie movie, they would flop. That's not their skill. And so even within an expertise like game design, people are good at specific types of games.
Yeah. Knowing someone's specific skill sets. And then I find another factor that ends up happening with me in my business is I kind of warp the business around the skills that we happen to have, right? Like, so I know I've got designers that can do a certain type of thing. I've got programmers that can do a certain type of thing. I've got like, we have a network of connections in this space. And so maybe we could I had connections at the Wharton School of Business. So I started doing educational games and teaching through to other companies and Fortune 500 companies and doing, innovation and entrepreneurship things. And it was like, okay, it's just like it matched my interests and some connections we had, and then I had a team that could do it. And so like I think a lot of times like business opportunity also comes out of that like mishmash of just like knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and either that allows you to hire to fill the gaps if there's a key weakness, or it allows you to strategically push in a direction that says, okay, well these are our strengths and these are kind of untapped resources that we have. Let's go ahead and leverage those.
Yeah.
I want to transition this, kind of tie a few items together, because I think there's this idea. One of the key skills you talked about was, creating kind of the frothing fan, right? This like I've created a brand and I've created this thing where people just want to hear the next thing we have and they're going to come, the sort of raving fan, Matt, and this idea of like how do we market successfully with. And I'm going to pair this with the idea of word of mouth as the way we recruit, because I still think that as the marketing world gets harder and harder, and everybody can attest to this. It's again sort of a cliche that there's just more people making games and more channels are crowded. I still think word of mouth is the thing that does this, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because I still, how do you create frothing fans? What are the things that have been successful in your experience from kind of marketing tools, and does is this my intuition right here that it really is about kind of this word of mouth, and if so, how do you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, the word I might use is community. Yes, community is super important. The bigger part of the value that we're providing is a community. And ideally, if you're so think of it this way: when someone spends money to buy a game, if the experience is I pay $60 or $80, and then I go to a game convention and I say, hey, I've got this game. It's called blah, blah, blah. Do you want to play it? And everyone goes, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. What's it like? I've never heard of it. And now they're grilling you. And now you're worried about whether it's going to be fun. And then, maybe you convince them to play, and now you're teaching, and the whole thing could be not fun. You don't know. Like that experience, you just paid $60, $80 for an experience, which is not great. On the other hand, you say, hey, I've got a game. It's called Wingspan. And someone goes, oh my God, how did you get a copy of that? I wanted a copy, but they sold out. Yeah, I really want to play. All of a sudden you're a hero and you're providing, you're providing them something they want. So that community, even though the game could have been exactly the same, the game mechanic could have been exactly the same, the experience that someone's purchasing is completely different. And people want to purchase that experience of I'm a part of something that's bigger than me. It's fun. Which is exactly why our industry is a blockbuster industry. We're a blockbuster industry because people want to be playing the games that other people are playing and being a part of something, a community. So yeah, I agree. I don't know if you're talking, if that's addressing what you're saying about word of mouth. It's looking at it slightly differently, but it's that leads to word of mouth, which is way more powerful than any advertisement, than anything you can do, even any award. The fact that everyone's playing it and talking about it and it's a thing makes you want to watch Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or a Game of Thrones. You want to be part of the conversation. And it's important for you to remember that as the owner of a company, because even though we haven't yet talked about really game design, which is my real expertise and what I really am passionate about, I know that my product won't sell based upon the mechanics I put in. It needs to have a hook and a brand that people go, oh my God, this sounds so cool, I want to play it. And then building that brand with fans there's a relationship and a give and a take and a little bit of a dance to get them excited about your products. And then like you say, that becomes infectious, and word of mouth helps grow it.
Yeah, well, so we kind of started this whole conversation, talking about game design and some key principles of game design, and I like weaving this in with the business side, because you're one of the few guests I have that shares both sides of that equation, and I think I'm going to push back a little bit, because you said, the game design and the game engine doesn't really make the that happen, the frothing and the brand identity happen. And I think that it does. It doesn't make it happen on its own, right? But I think that the idea that you have a mechanic or a hook or a system that plays in, and tying it back to the sort of early principles we talked about, where it's like, hey, this audience needs this thing, and it creates a gameplay experience that now fits to that audience, or this audience, the game mechanics we have let me participate. So Wits and Wagers, for example, right? Let's say game, like I don't have this sort of fear, shame, or embarrassment around not having a trivia answer. So I'm okay to put this to the table or be a part of it and share it than I would otherwise. That is a big part of what makes that a success, right? And so I think that there is aspects, or I think a lot now about table presence in the game designs. Like, how do you make it such that it like looks good on a table and or streams well, right? To allow people to share it and give them the gift of letting them share it in a way that is cool and gives them presence and lets them pay attention.
Well, here, let me share my framework. So, and it'll be worth exactly what you pay for it. The brand is the most important thing. So when you look at the sales of a game in its first year, if it's an Eric Lang game, if it's a Fantasy Flight game, if it's a Stonemaier game, if it's a Star Wars game, so all these things are brands outside of the game itself, and that's going to determine. And I'm willing to even say sometimes a brand is just like a hook, not a pre-existing brand, but you hear it and you're like, oh, that sounds so cool. So maybe a hook is a better way to call it. The hook, which is often a brand in our industry, will determine the sales in the first year more than anything else. So Rob Daviau comes out with a legacy game. It's called Seafall. The brand is huge. That first year sells a bunch of games. The game was too ambitious, clunky, didn't quite work. I never played it, so I don't know exactly. So the sales crashed. Alternatively, you get a game like Manhattan Project. It's called an Ever Brown. It sold 5,000 copies the first year. Phenomenal game. Sold 5,000 copies the next year, and the next year, and the next year. Maybe even grew up to 6, then down to 4, and it's got this long tail. And so what I'm shooting for in my company is, how do we get a brand that's exciting to people in year one with mechanics? So the mechanics, to me, create the long tail. The brand creates the launch. And so what I want to do is nail those two things together. So like Wingspan is a great game. You can play it a lot. It's got a lot of replay value. And the brand was Stonemaier, came right after Scythe. And everyone was like, viticultures, and then this, and then this, and then Scythe. And it was like, oh my God, what's next? And what's next happened to be a game about birds. Pandemic happened, and a lot of people went to birding. It was done by a women designer. People were really excited to have a woman designer. She's an amazing woman and a great like spokesperson for the industry. So like, then there's a convergence of all these things. But that brand, if someone else had released Wingspan, it would have been an Ever Brown. It would have sold a few thousand copies a year, not hundreds.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I like that framework a lot. I think that there is this idea of the sort of long tail of a great game. And I think, this is going to be true for any commercial media to some extent, right? You have Marvel movie. There's going to be a certain number of people that are just going to watch it because it's a Marvel movie. If it's a great Marvel movie, then maybe you keep rewatching it a decade later or whatever,
Yeah. So that's exactly that first Marvel movie people are going to just watch because the brand is so big. And if it's not that good, it'll die out really quickly. But if it's great, you watch it again, you talk about it again, and then that obviously leads to sequels. But yeah, it has a long tail.
All right, so I think that's a great set of insights there. I think let's dig in, because I want to make sure that people understand the full arc of the story, and even I understand the full arc of the story, because you have incredible success, game sells more, games that sell more than most designers ever dream of. And then at some point, this business and game thing sort of takes a turn for the worse and ends up. I think it does in fact go bankrupt at some point, or
Basically,
just kind of.
I bought the assets for more than they were worth because it felt guilty to just get them for free.
So talk me through that. So you have investors, you have employees. Like, again, just not to dwell on the negative, but to be able to kind of rise from the ashes as you have here is pretty impressive. So what happened? How did this go down? Like, help me understand.
From the start, we bootstrapped. I put about $30,000 on credit cards, and just was like a bootstrapping thing, and then raised, I think, $95,000, $30,000 from one of our entrepreneurship professors at the University of Maryland, and then classmates and friends and family. And so we had $95,000, which took us to Wits Wagers. And then when Wits Wagers, when the target buyer said, we'd like to put Wits Wagers nationwide, can you do that? I was like, sure, yeah, no problem. And did some quick math and went, Satish, we need about $400,000 in the next 3 months. And so then we put together a presentation, did a roadshow. But the fact that Target already wanted us obviously made that big. Kevin Plank, the founder of Under Armour, put on a competition, the Cupid Cups competition, because he used to go to University of Maryland. We won that competition, his first one. 2 investors from the audience put in $100,000. We ended up raising like maybe 400, whatever we needed. But basically, we were just always producing results, which led to the next level of funding. Ended up raising a total of $1.2 million when we decided to do a digital division. And then I'd say the digital division was a complete failure for us, along with a whole bunch of things that just all kind of crumbled. And then I bought the assets from the investors, and now I'm trying again.
God, man, our stories are so similar. It's eerie. Like literally, it was like exactly the same process, and the numbers and specifics maybe shift a little bit, but like we ended up, we raised millions to be able to build our first digital division, managed.
Oh, SoulForge. I loved it. I donated so much money to SoulForge. I'm spending money I'm helping Justin because I love this game, even though,
Well, I appreciate that.
You had maybe $500-$600 of mine in that game.
Oh, well, your money is appreciated and was lost along with a lot of other people's money at the time.
I knew I was risking it, but I was like, I love that game was my favorite of all the digital implementations that have yet been released, from Magic to Hearthstone to anything. I was like, why can't it be as good as SoulForge?
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. And then, we were able to sort of avoid bankruptcy, but barely, and kind of clawed our way back up. And then, reinvested in the game and now launched SoulForge Fusion and now have a new version of it. And all of the original people who put money into SoulForge, we gave them our new Web3 token, far in excess of their of their money in. So we were able to make people whole that participated. We were able to launch a new version of the game. We were able to have a new life to it. And so it sounds like you've done a sort of similar thing in this, with a slightly different path. So talk to me about the new life. Let's talk about the new thing. Let's end this on a positive note and where people can support you, because I mean, again, these are titanic moments as you're going through them, right? I mean, it is not easy when you feel like you failed your employees, you failed your team, you failed your fans,
everyone, yourself.
It's exactly. It is crushing. I mean, my personal, psychological journey aside, I can totally understand, where you're coming from, and I share these stories in hopes that it helps other people who might be going through dark times, and that say that there is like a light and learning that comes from this. So you've got a new game that you're launching this year, and let's talk a little bit about that and how we're doing it. Yeah.
The last 3 years of my life have been working on this game, Nature, and rebuilding a team. And that's all I've done. I haven't released any products. Basically, we've licensed other people's games from Hong Kong and released them, but nothing internally. It's a huge project. So in a nutshell, I am trying to create a lifestyle game with a gateway center that can bring families in. That's just at a core. And when I got pressed by Corey Heath, who was one of the designers of the gang, who was kind of getting mad at one of our design teams or groups, He's like, Dominic, why are you doing this stupid game? You've already done evolution. Like, is this going to win the Spiel des Jahres? And I was like, no, it really doesn't have, it won't win the Spiel. It's like, why are you wasting your time with this? And it prompted me to think about it. Why am I wasting my time with this? And it turns out my experience playing Pro Magic was so impactful to me and so magical that I wanted to share it. And I couldn't share it with my girlfriend. I tried. She played with me, but she didn't catch the bug. I couldn't share it with any of my friends from college. I couldn't share it with my parents who are gamers. Nobody. So my life turned into my life and my friends, and then what I called my magic friends. And some of the magic friends I didn't even like. I didn't respect. There was cheating involved. There were things that I thought were unethical. I was like, I don't even really enjoy some of the people that I'm spending a lot of time with. So the nature is trying to give that experience, bring it to more people. And what it needs is a core gateway that's just as simple as it can be and really, really fun that you can teach. And I've taught this to a lot of families, like casual gaming families, and it works. And so it's kind of like a 3-stage process. And then it's a modular game system. So you can mix and match as many modules as you want. And the modules then change the environment to create an ecosystem that you can explore and discover. The step for each module has to be super small. And so with family testing, like relatives, I would say, hey, do you want to play one of the modules? No, let's just play nature. Hey, how about now? No, we'll just play nature. And so it wasn't until maybe the third vacation, where we're like in an Airbnb vacation home, where for some reason she said, yeah, let's try a new module. Let's try a module. So we tried one module. And then after that, she was hooked. She was like, wow. And I was like, yeah, hey, next time we can play Flight again. And she's like, well, what else is there? And so, and the reason that it was so exciting for her is the rules were very small. Once you know the core game, with just changing a few core rules, you can really change the whole emotion. So you add a few traits and change a few core rules, and you have to reevaluate every card. And so she was hooked. And so that's the second level, but you haven't yet reached what I consider the magic experience, which is a world of limitless possibilities that you're exploring with your friends and discovering things that the game designer doesn't even know about. And so where the nature system does that is it's a modular system. So right now at launch, I think there's about 100 different combinations between the 5 modules and the 2 mini modules. And while I've play tested each module hundreds of times, I have not play tested all of the combinations. And so those are like building blocks, like Legos, and you can now explore things that I know nothing about. And then we can talk. I'm part of the community now. I can speak with people, argue with people, say, I don't know. I don't think that's too good. I like this. I don't think that's a good combo. And so that's kind of hopefully a 3-step process that can get people to have that spark of discovering a world of synergies and limitless combinations.
Fascinating. Okay. I'm really intrigued and want to try this because it's an ambitious project.
It is so ambitious.
There's a lot of people who've kind of tried to take bites at this apple. It's not an easy one to land and get right. So where you're launching it later this year, which means you've got most of this dialed in. What's your plans to launch, or how can people find out more about it if they're excited about it?
So we had a Kickstarter, fairly successful, about $850,000. We're launching it at Gen Con. We're going to launch the core game and 2 modules. And then we will launch 2 more modules in November and then another one in April of 26. The Kickstarter people were able to buy a big box with all 5 modules. And we have a digital version. So nature is a re-implementation of evolution. So it's really part of, I've been working in this system for the last 10 years. And it wasn't until Corey asked me these pointed questions that I really kind of figured out why I was so obsessed with trying to make this thing work. And the key is, how do you get the core game easy enough to teach, but compelling enough to have replay value, kind of like a Carcassonne or a Ticket to Ride or a Pandemic, like something that's really core. And then how do you create a modular system around that? So what happened is Target initially said, hey, Dominic, you are a hobby gamer. Why don't you create hobby games? Like hobby games are blowing up here, and you have Wits and Wagers and Say Anything, and you understand games, and we're getting pitched these really complicated things. I'm sure you can do a better job. And I told them, we don't have a hobby division, so like I can't bring fans. So like, yeah, the game will come out, but it won't sell. So let me first create a hobby division, which I did with the Evolution brand. It was quite a big hit. I think we've sold 350,000 copies about. But when I came to Target, I still didn't think, I thought it was too complicated. So I created Evolution in the beginning for Target, and that sold like 110,000 copies at Target. And in there was leading people to go play Evolution, because in my mind, Evolution was the actual game. And instead, people wanted expansions to Evolution in the beginning. And I realized like I just screwed up. Like that game, that gateway should be the game itself. And you should already know all the rules with that game. And then the world is built around it with modules. So I'm going back and just redesigning everything the way I wished I had done it from the start.
Well, maybe a small theme of this phase of our journey, which is one I relate to, which is the fix the things I didn't do right and learn from those mistakes and try them again now. Whatever. It's very grateful to, again, moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. This is like a key place where, look, because we learn from each iteration, right? And the same things. Like I've been lucky enough to be able to go back and revisit my old designs. We released the Shards of Infinity Saga collection, which took all 4 expansions, revised them, and then actually has them, you unlock them through play. So it has a similar mod,
like a campaign. Yeah,
exactly.
Really,
it's sort of
really
like a little
nice
mini, legacy light is kind of what we call it, right? Where you unlock the different elements of it. There's, you have little stickers and things to indicate that what you've done, but it creates.
Wait, this is cardboard?
Yeah, cardboard.
Oh, okay. I was thinking digital.
Yeah. Yeah. This is for Shards of Infinity. So it has the ability.
That's a digital game to me.
Unfortunately, only the first expansion, only the first set is available digitally. So I can't. I want to get more of those out. But yeah, so it's a allowing people to have that experience of discovery and then kind of opt into the sort of infinite, infinite depth that can come from it as a deck building game or a trading card game or a kind of board game that's trying to mimic those things. I think it's just so critical and so valuable. So thank you for sharing the story with us, man.
Yeah, thank you.
There were parts I knew already, parts I didn't, and again, the amount of parallel and overlap we have is fascinating to me. I definitely want to come see you at Gen Con and check out the game myself.
That'd be great.
Then hopefully other people will be doing the same. So I'd love to do another one of these, maybe on the other side of Gen Con and hear how it all went.
Yeah, that'd be great. I can also give you a copy of the digital game, which has tutorials and a campaign, and there's 3 modules that are already in there. So
great. That's way easier for me in general as a nomad. Yeah. Big box games are not useful to me, generally speaking. So I'll take the digital game. That sounds great.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much, buddy. We'll chat. I'll see you at Gen Con.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you want to support the podcast, please rate, comment, and share on your favorite podcast platforms, such as iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever device you're listening on. Listener reviews and shares make a huge difference and help us grow this community, and will allow me to bring more amazing guests and insights to you. I've taken the insights from these interviews, along with my 20 years of experience in the game industry, and compressed it all into a book with the same title as this podcast, Think Like a Game Designer. In it, I give step-by-step instructions on how to apply the lessons from these great designers and bring your own games to life. If you think you might be interested, you can check out the book at thinklikeagamedesigner.com or wherever fine books are sold.